Warning, this video contains creepy images, jump scares, sudden loud noises, and disturbing subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey guys, I'm WillyMammoth, and welcome back to another video. Today, we'll be looking at my personal list of the top 10 best horror games of all time. Keep in mind that this is entirely based off of my opinion, so if you don't see your favorite games on here, don't complain in the comments. If you don't see your favorite games, it's because I likely have never played them, or I've never even heard of them. Games featured on this list will only be games that I have played from start to finish. But with that being said, let's get right into the video. The Forest is a horror game that takes the phrase survival horror quite literally. It's an actual survival game, meaning you have to collect food and water to survive. The game also has a pretty extensive base building mechanic, which is essential to your playthrough. The game opens with you and your son on a plane when it suddenly crashes. You wake up in a random spawn point on an island, seeing a strange figure stealing your son. You are cold, you are hungry, you are afraid, but most importantly, you are not alone. The Forest takes place on a strange island inhabited by mutant cannibals. The cannibals' AI is actually quite impressive. They will usually just watch you from a distance for the first few days on the island. However, if the player chooses to attack them frequently, then the cannibals will show up in force. They always know where the player is, so even if you think you are safe in your big base, trust me, you are not. The game is even scarier when playing by yourself, as you are completely isolated with no friendly people anywhere. The threat of a cannibal scout team or a giant mutant monster is always present, no matter where you are on the island. To progress the story, you will have to venture into a series of dark, claustrophobic caves that are home to the scariest creatures on the island. As the player delves deeper into the cannibals' territory, they will begin to unravel the disturbing origins of the island's inhabitants. I won't spoil the game's story any further, because honestly, it is very good. The game also has 2 endings that you can achieve. You should play the game for yourself, as it is truly one of my favorite games of all time. Penumbra Overture and Penumbra Black Plague are games made by the same studio that made Amnesia, Frictional Games. The Penumbra games were Frictional Games' first foray into the horror genre, and they really hit the nail on the head with these titles. The Penumbra games, which are episodic so they really only count as one game, are some of the creepiest titles you will ever play. They have the player venture into the icy wastelands of Greenland, where freezing temperatures force you into an abandoned mine. It soon becomes apparent that you are not alone down here, and the player must fight aggressive animals and infected humans. Soon you will be caught in a conspiracy revolving around an ancient cult and their plans to spread a horrific virus across the globe. You will go on to traverse an underground laboratory, running for your life from the infected. Being underground in a dark space is scary enough, but what's even scarier is the fact that you can't escape. Outside is just freezing Arctic winds, snow, and ice. You are truly isolated from the outside world. No one is coming to save you. Project Zomboid is one of the best zombie survival simulators on the market. The game takes place in Knox County, ground zero of a mysterious zombie infection. You play as a completely random character, or one that you create yourself, and you are thrown into a world with no hand-holding. There is no end goal. There are no quests, and there is no hope of survival. These are the end times, and this is how you died. Project Zomboid is unforgiving, intense, and fun. If you are a fan of zombie games, you'll love this one. The game is also multiplayer, but I would recommend you first play single player. In single player, you are truly alone. You are the last living person in Knox County, and you are truly isolated. Zombies can sneak up on you at any time. So always be sure to clear each room in the buildings you scavenge, and be careful not to make too much noise, or you'll draw the attention of a horde. Project Zomboid also has a very active modding community on the Steam Workshop, so if you get bored with the base game, you'll have lots of fun modding it too. SCP Containment Breach is a free-to-play horror game that takes place in the fictional SCP Foundation. The SCP Foundation secures and contains various anomalous entities within its facilities. These entities range anywhere from giant life-hating lizards to sentient computers.
Human, listen carefully. You need my help. I need your help.
To pack-based predators that mimic human voices. to a literal zombie virus. There are thousands of SCPs on the wiki, but there are only 34 that you can encounter in Containment Breach. Some are completely harmless, while others are incredibly dangerous. Each one has its own unique backstory and strange powers. The player character is completely defenseless, and your only course of action is to run at the first sign of any danger. Traversing the tight, dark hallways of the containment facility is like playing through a twisted nightmare. This game also has multiple endings that depend on the choices you make throughout your playthrough. f.e.a.r, or First Encounter Assault Recon, is a first-person horror shooter. Yeah, you heard me right. Now don't let that put you off though, as f.e.a.r is truly a scary game. Not only does it have a good story, but the scares throughout will leave you frightened for sure. This game does contain its fair share of jump scares, but they were never in bad taste and always made the game feel better in my opinion. f.e.a.r has the player assume the role of a soldier, tasked with combating paranormal threats to national security. While chasing down a rogue psychic operative, your character begins to have horrific hallucinations involving a creepy little girl. You soon discover that she is responsible for the terrifying events in the game's main story. This game's ending is also incredible and will stick with you well after playing.
What do you see? What is it?
Resident Evil 7 is the first game in the Resident Evil series to be entirely first-person. This was obviously inspired by the success of PT, a first-person Silent Hill tech demo from a few years earlier. Resident Evil 7 takes place in rural Louisiana, at a rundown farmhouse occupied by a seemingly insane cannibal family. This game shifted the Resident Evil formula because instead of fighting zombies, you fight a sadistic family and creatures known as the Molded, which are these creepy, dark beings that are seemingly made of some sort of goo. As you progress through the game, the deeper story unfolds, and your perspective on the game's events changes. This is by far one of the best Resident Evil titles, and I highly recommend you play it, even if you are new to the series.
Welcome to the family, son.
Cry of Fear is a free-to-play horror game that was originally a Half-Life mod. The game is absolutely disturbing and not for the faint of heart. The enemies are grotesque, and the locations are dark and scary. The game was obviously inspired by Silent Hill, and it's easy to tell why. The story follows a man who gets into a car accident, only to wake up in a seemingly abandoned world filled with hellish creatures. To this day, I have trouble playing through this game because it is legitimately so scary. I also need to give a serious trigger warning for this game because it deals with some very disturbing and heavy topics, so keep that in mind if you do decide to play it. Resident Evil 2 is one of the best entries in the Resident Evil franchise, and it is also one of the scariest. Despite being a title for the original PlayStation, it holds up surprisingly well to this day. Players are dropped into an overrun and infected Raccoon City, shortly following the events of the first game. You spend the majority of the game locked inside of the Raccoon City Police Department. The RPD is one of the most iconic locations in gaming history, and for good reason. The place is ransacked and covered in blood. Moans from the undead can be heard from outside and from inside its walls. Zombies and other terrifying creatures stalk the halls as you make your way around the police station. Resident Evil 2 is also known for its puzzles, which is a staple of the survival horror genre. I also wanted to include the Resident Evil 2 remake in this entry as I truly believe it is just as good, if not better, than the original. The remake is different enough to be fresh and enjoyable, while still staying true to its source material. Experiencing the RPD in 4K with more realistic graphics is an awesome experience. I highly recommend you play both versions of this amazing game. Silent Hill is a legendary game that really needs no introduction. Much like Resident Evil 2, it still holds up incredibly well for being a PS1 game. Silent Hill's foggy streets are one of the most memorable video game locations in history, and the story is also unforgettable. You play as Harry Mason, who gets into a car accident with his young daughter. Upon waking up, you realize she is missing, so you stumble on foot down the road until you reach a place called Silent Hill. Silent Hill is full of terrifying, demonic entities that hunt Harry down relentlessly. The player uncovers the dark truth behind the town's sordid history as he searches for his daughter. The game has multiple endings, which is pretty impressive for its time. The game's soundtrack is also remembered fondly by both fans and casual gamers alike for being hauntingly beautiful. Silent Hill is the type of game that will scare you, then put you at ease, and then make you cry. This is a game that everyone should play at least once in their lives. Before we get to number 1, let's take a look at my honorable mentions. The Resident Evil HD remake, originally released on the GameCube, is without a doubt one of the best horror games ever made. It received another HD upscale for PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One, and that version is by far the best. I was going to include it on the main list, but I didn't want 3 entries being Resident Evil titles. The fixed camera angles, tight mansion corridors, and living bioweapons are what makes this game shine above the rest. The third Silent Hill game is fondly remembered by fans as one of the best. A direct sequel to Silent Hill 1, it continues the story where it left off. This game features some of the scariest enemies I have ever encountered in any game, so I highly recommend you play it. Dead by Daylight. I've been playing Dead by Daylight since 2020, and I have to say, the game has had its fair share of ups and downs. Despite everything though, it is still a very fun game to play. Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical survival horror game, which pits 4-player survivors against 1-player killer. The survivors must complete a series of generators to power an exit gate to escape, while the killer must hunt them down and hook them. The game actually has a bunch of licensed killers and survivors from famous franchises, including Halloween, Scream, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and even The Ring. Each killer has their own unique abilities, and each character comes with unique perks that you can equip for any character once you prestige. The scary factor does wear off for the most part after a few hundred hours, but stealth killers like Michael Myers still jump scare even the most veteran of players to this day. Your first few hours will be intense and very scary, so have fun playing. Dino Crisis is a survival horror game for the PS1, created by Shinji Mikami, the creator of the Resident Evil series. Dino Crisis is often described as Resident Evil, but with dinosaurs, and to be honest, that's an accurate description. Dinosaurs in video games have always been scary to me. There's just something about large, apex predators running towards you that sends chills down my spine. Dino Crisis may be a little goofy compared to other horror games, but it still holds up very well to this day, and is perfect for anyone who loves dinosaurs like me. PT, which stands for Playable Teaser, was a tech demo for an unreleased Silent Hill reboot that was going to be made by Hideo Kojima, director of the Metal Gear Solid series and of Death Stranding. Konami cancelled all plans for this game after parting ways with Kojima in 2015. However, this game's short lifespan left quite an impact on the horror genre. PT was only available on the PlayStation 4 and seemingly appeared overnight. The demo received critical acclaim for its first-person perspective and terrifying gameplay. PT was essentially just a looping hallway, but it had players engaged and on the edge of their seats. At the end of the demo, the player is revealed to be playing as Norman Reedus, and the title card for Silent Hills plays. Sadly, PT was removed from the PlayStation Store after Konami canceled the title, which makes this one of the rarest PS4 games of all time. PT became a pop culture sensation, and it is fondly remembered to this day. Silent Hill 2 is by far the greatest horror game of all time. Silent Hill 2 doesn't really have much to do with the first game, so you can skip the first one if you just want to jump into number 2. Silent Hill 2 follows James Sunderland, a depressed man who gets a letter from his supposedly deceased wife Mary. The letter claims that Mary is in Silent Hill waiting for him. Upon arriving in the town, James soon discovers that it is filled with nightmarish monsters. He must fight for his very survival, all the while searching for his wife Mary, but all is not as it seems. I will not spoil much of this game's story because you should go into it entirely blind, but I will say that Silent Hill 2's claustrophobic environments, hellish enemies, eerie soundtrack, and multiple endings will stick with you for the rest of your life. There isn't an actual canon ending to the game, so you can decide which one best suits you. Alright, that does it for today's video, guys. I hope you decide to check out at least a few of these amazing games if you haven't already. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content in the future, and I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.